The worst deaths in every marathon. The marathon was invented by a death, or at least that is the story. The reality, as with most things in marathon history, is more complicated and more dangerous than the legend suggests. Here are 4 marathon deaths spanning 2,500 years. 4 completely different races, 4 completely different causes, and 4 stories that changed how the world runs. Pheidipids, the death that started it all. In September of 490 BC, an Athenian soldier messenger named Pheidipides reportedly ran from the battlefield at Marathon to the city of Athens, approximately 25 miles, to deliver news of a Greek victory over the Persian army. According to the version of the story that became legend, he arrived, gasped the words, "We have won," and dropped dead. It's a perfect story. It's also almost certainly not what actually happened. The earliest surviving account of Pheidipides, written by the historian Herodotus only decades after the battle, says he was sent not from Marathon to Athens, but from Athens to Sparta and back, a round trip of over 300 miles, completed in approximately 3 days. That Pheidipides is a different kind of figure, not a soldier with one last dramatic mile in him, but a professional long-distance runner, a hemerodrome, someone whose entire job was covering impossible distances at impossible speeds. He probably survived. The version involving the run to Athens, the announcement, and the death appears much later, in the writings of Lucian, composing around 600 years after the battle, and may be a conflation of 2 different runners and 2 different stories. Most modern historians believe the collapse and die ending was added for dramatic effect, not recorded from eyewitness testimony. But it doesn't matter, in one sense. The story of a man who ran himself to death carrying a message became the entire mythology on which the modern marathon was built. When the first modern Olympic Games were held in Athens in 1896, the marathon race was added specifically to honor this legend. The distance was run from the plain of Marathon to the Olympic Stadium. A Greek shepherd named Spiridon Louis won. The legend, however imprecise, had become a sport, and the sport would develop deaths of its own. Francisco Lazaro, the first Olympic marathon death. On July 14, 1912, a 21-year-old Portuguese runner named Francisco Lazaro took his place at the start line of the Olympic marathon in Stockholm, Sweden. It was a brutally hot Sunday. Temperatures reached into the 80s, and the 68-man field included runners from across the world competing in one of the most prestigious events in sport. Lazaro was considered a promising young talent. He had prepared carefully, but in one way he had prepared as athletes of the era often did. He had covered large parts of his body in wax to prevent sunburn and chafing during the long race. What he and most runners of the time didn't know was that the wax would also prevent his skin from sweating, blocking one of the body's primary cooling systems entirely. By mile 19, Lazaro collapsed on the course. Race officials carried him off the road and attempted to help him, but he was already in serious distress. He was taken to a hospital in Stockholm, where doctors worked through the night to stabilize him. He died the following morning, July 15, 1912, from a combination of heart failure and severe overheating. He was 21 years old and became the first person in the modern Olympic era to die as a direct result of athletic competition. The Swedish Olympic Committee arranged for his body to be returned to Portugal. The Portuguese athletic community held a state of mourning. A monument was erected in his hometown of Lisbon. The cause of his death eventually helped shift athletic understanding of thermoregulation during endurance events, but only slowly over decades. Cynthia Lucero, the water that killed her. In April of 2002, 32-year-old Cynthia Lucero of Anchorage, Alaska, was running the Boston Marathon, one of the most famous races in the world. She was not an elite runner. She was a recreational athlete who had prepared carefully, followed official advice, and was doing everything she'd been told to do to stay safe. She was drinking water at every station on the course. For years, marathon officials, race organizers, and coaches had hammered the same message into participants. Dehydration is the danger. Drink early and often. Don't wait until you're thirsty. The advice was well-intentioned and based on real concerns about heat illness. What it failed to account for was a condition called exercise-associated hyponatremia, a state in which a runner drinks so much water during a long race that the sodium concentration in their blood drops to a dangerous level. When sodium levels fall too low, water floods into the body's cells through osmosis, including brain cells. The brain, enclosed in a rigid skull, has nowhere to expand. It swells, pressure builds, and the result is a potentially fatal brain herniation. Lucero collapsed near the finish line and was taken to Brigham and Women's Hospital in critical condition. She died 2 days later. Her sodium levels had dropped catastrophically from overhydration. The irony and the tragedy was that a condition caused by drinking too much water was regularly misdiagnosed at race medical stations as dehydration, leading doctors to give affected runners the fourth fluids, which made the hyponatremia worse. Her death, along with other documented cases, prompted a complete reversal in official marathon hydration guidance. By 2003, major race medical directors had shifted the recommendation from drink at every station to drink when thirsty. The guidance printed on water stations at major marathons changed. The death toll from hyponatremia at races dropped. Cynthia Lucero never saw it happen, but the advice she had followed when she died is the advice that has now been corrected. In a very specific sense, her race changed every race that came after it. The Gansu Ultramarathon, 21 in one afternoon. On the morning of May 2021, 172 runners gathered in the Yellow River Stone Forest in Jingtai County, Gansu Province, China, for the start of a 100-kilometer mountain trail ultramarathon. The previous 3 years of the race had taken place in warm, sunny conditions. Many runners offered the option the night before to store their cold weather gear at a checkpoint midway through the course, had handed over their windbreakers to be picked up later. They set off in vests and shorts. At around 10:30 in the morning, a cold front from Mongolia reached the exposed high-elevation section of the course, between the second and third checkpoints, at an elevation of more than 7,000 feet. Within 90 minutes, apparent temperatures at that checkpoint dropped from 34 degrees Fahrenheit to 23 degrees Fahrenheit, accompanied by level 9 wind gusts and rain. The runners in the lead pack, the fastest competitors in the field, were crossing that section when the weather hit. The organizers had no staff stationed between checkpoints. The area was in a mobile phone signal dead zone that the organizers hadn't known about. Collapsed runners couldn't call for help. Passing runners who tried to report what they were seeing couldn't reach anyone either. Rescue teams, once dispatched, needed 1 to 2 hours on foot to reach the affected area in the best conditions. The rescue teams arrived at 7 p.m. The cold front had struck at 10:30 a.m. By the time all searches were complete, 21 runners had died from hypothermia. They included Liang Jing, a former champion who had won the same race 3 times and whose sports watch recorded his heart stopping at 1:08 p.m., less than 3 hours after the cold front began. Among the dead was also Huang Guanjun, a Paralympic marathon champion. The county's Communist Party secretary, who had overseen the event's organization, died by suicide weeks later. An official investigation found the organizers had been warned of the possibility of strong winds before the race. They had not communicated the warning to runners, had not stationed safety personnel between checkpoints, and had not equipped the race with any contingency plan for weather-related emergencies. 19 officials and race company staff were arrested or disciplined. It was the deadliest single race in the history of competitive distance running. 4 races: a legend, an Olympic Games, a Sunday morning in Boston, and a Chinese mountain in May. The deaths came from exhaustion, from wax on the skin, from too much water, and from a weather forecast nobody passed on. The marathon has always been, from the very first story ever told about it, a race that kills people. The question has never been whether the distance is dangerous. It has always been which danger nobody thought to warn you about.